During the past several days, I have received two interesting responses to my previous video presentations regarding atheism, both from individuals who do not believe in God, but also from individuals who question the use of the term atheist as applied to those who do not believe in God. And I believe that these responses make several interesting points that I would like to address and respond to. Furthermore, I would like to present my case as to why I think the term atheist is a necessary and useful term to use for reference to those who do not believe in God. Now, this may be an explanation for why I personally choose to use the term and the advantages that I perceive in doing so. If you disagree with me, then I do not necessarily think that you ought to adopt this use of this term. However, I do ask that you hear out my arguments and see if you perceive the advantages of using this term to outweigh the disadvantages. The comment that I received in an email states, "Only a theist can call someone an atheist. I cannot call myself an atheist because it presumes and validates theism, which is a contradiction. I not only reject the theist theories, but also reject the terms atheist and atheism as collateral products of an invalid theory. For example, if I were a member of a group who believed that extinct dodo birds are the controllers of the universe, I could name non-members anything I want. Let's call them dorkheads. Now, do you think non-members will start calling each other dorkheads? Of course not. That is why I am not an atheist." So this is the position of the author of the email. The author of a response to one of my videos on YouTube, an individual for whom I have great respect, also writes the following: "If you look at this issue from a different perspective, the term atheist is very odd, and perhaps even insulting. After all, there is no special term or semi-denigrating label for he who disbelieves in ghosts, or she who denies the existence of witches and vampires. Theists alone deserve the insulting nomenclature." Now, it is true that historically the term atheist began to be used as a pejorative against those who either openly did not believe in God, or as a way of members of some religious sects to accuse members of other religious sects of impiety or improper beliefs. And even the Wikipedia entry on atheism states that during the 16th and 17th centuries, nobody would have dreamed of calling himself an atheist. Indeed, the term was reserved for insults hurled among theists at each other when one group of theists believed that another group of theists did not have the proper set of beliefs. Now, given this historical origin, it's understandable why a lot of people who don't believe in any God would want to distance themselves from the label of atheist, which was originally conferred by the religious on the non-religious or even on other religious groups. But nevertheless, I think there are reasons why this term still ought to be used, and why I, at least personally, would like to use it in reference to myself. One such reason is that the most effective way to nullify a smear is to transform it in its meaning into either an innocuous description or a badge of pride. A great historical example of this is the word capitalism. Now, the word capitalism, in fact, originated as a smear against the free market economy. It was coined by Karl Marx. Karl Marx described capitalism as the economic system that rewards the owners of capital alone, and he posited in contrast to capitalism, socialism, the economic system that rewards the entirety of society. Now, of course, I do not agree with the claim that socialism rewards the entirety of society, or that capitalism rewards the capital owners alone. But the solution to this kind of nomenclature is not to reject the term altogether. Rather, many distinguished free market economists and philosophers have managed to transform capitalism, originally meant as a smear term, into a badge of pride. So today one can call oneself a capitalist and be respected for it. One could call oneself a capitalist and say, yes, I believe in individual freedom, I believe in free trade, I believe in an economy devoid of government regulations. So, similarly, the same thing could be done with atheism, and indeed has been done since the 18th century Enlightenment. Because the word atheism itself is not necessarily a smear. It's not like the word dorkhead suggested by the author of the email. Indeed, atheism comes from the Greek atheos, which means without God or godless. There's nothing necessarily insulting about that. It just means one doesn't believe in God. Now, hypothetically, in response to the second comment I received, let us say that there were a term for a worldview that believed in ghosts. Let's call it ghostism. And the advocates of ghostism use a similar strategy to the one used by theists and call non-believers in ghosts aghostists. Now, I don't know if I would mind being called an aghostist, because contrary to the author of the email, I don't think that by accepting such a label, I would implicitly validate ghostism. Indeed, all I would be saying by calling myself an aghostist is that I do not believe the set of principles that is enunciated in ghostism. Another reason to call oneself an atheism is word economy, and furthermore, the ease of conceptualization. If I were to refer to myself in all cases as someone who does not believe in any God, then construction of sentences regarding my lack of this belief would be quite cumbersome. I would have to use 8 words instead of 1 in virtually everything I say. Now, the reason why the term atheism is convenient is because there are so many discussions regarding religion and regarding deities. For good or for evil, these discussions exist, and very often one finds these discussions thrust upon oneself. So, in order to be able to effectively enunciate one's non-belief in any gods, it is much more efficient to use 1 term instead of 8. Furthermore, the origins of such a term are understandable historically, because historically religion originated much earlier than atheism. Now, there were some Indian schools of atheism in the 6th century BC. There were also some famous Greek atheists in ancient Athens, such as Diagoras, in the 5th century BC. But most religions originated much earlier than this, and for much of history, religion was the rule, and non-belief in any kind of God was a serious exception to that rule, and naturally that exception attracted notice and a term for it. And even today, atheism is the exception rather than the rule. 3% of Americans only are atheists, and according to Wikipedia, about 2.3% of the world's population, whereas only about 11.9% of the world's population doesn't believe in God or doesn't know, so they are either atheists or agnostics. So, it is understandable historically why this term exists, and living at the point in history that we do, it is still necessary to at least confront the fact that this term is being used. Now, denying one's atheism has certain problems in discourse with others, because one risks being misunderstood. Because if one denies being an atheist, another individual might assume that one is therefore atheist, that one is therefore a believer in a God. And I would not want that confusion to be made with regard to myself. So, what I have illustrated are several distinct advantages to using the term atheist, or at least several reasons why it is necessary to do that. Now, I would understand if you would personally consider the benefits and costs of doing so to be different from the way I consider them, and I would encourage your response with regard to whether you think this term ought to be used or not, and why.